Hey there, Sportsline on your television. Steve Laban here with you. Glad you are here with us on this Monday night on NewsChannel 5+. And we have plenty to talk about, of course, starting with that epic game last night at Bridgestone Arena. People on the edge of their seats for nearly 4 hours as the Predators and Jets slugged it out. This series that so many people around the hockey world had been looking forward to really since the middle of this season, when it was apparent how good these two teams were. And then they finished as the top two teams in the National Hockey League in the regular season. You knew it was going to be a collision course in round two. Here we've got it. I'm not sure if Friday lived up to the expectation. Last night certainly did. And the Predators even the series with Kevin Fiala's goal 85 minutes, 37 seconds into play. On a great feed from Craig Smith. It was set up by a gutsy play, a physical play by Kyle Turris to chip it along the boards and get control of that puck and spring what essentially was a 2-on-1 for the Predators to beat Connor Hellebuck and beat the Jets in the game to even the series. What a game it was, though. And Smashville brought out all the stops last night for that game. You had Carrie Underwood singing the national anthem. You had the Titans offensive line funneling beers through a catfish on the band stage before the game with the rally towels. You had James Shaw, as we talked about last week, the Waffle House hero, to be in the crowd and get cheers going during the course of the game. It was just an electric atmosphere. It was an atmosphere of desperation, frankly, because the Predators dropped game one, and as good as Winnipeg is on its home ice, you knew you couldn't afford to go down 0-2 in this series. And so they brought out all the stops. The atmosphere was incredible. It was an awesome environment last night, and it really went from start to finish for all 4 hours. It was just through the timeouts, through the intermissions. Chris Isaac played in one intermission. Phil Vassar played in another intermission. I mean, everything about the game just screamed, this is the big time. And the game was no slouch either. These two teams looked like the two best teams in hockey last night, back and forth. The Predators used all that energy to storm out of the gate. Very first shift of the game, Ryan Johansson scores 27 seconds in. Preds are on the board first, and it felt like, okay, maybe this is the night where the Avalanche comes downhill. And watch out if you're the visitor in Bridgestone Arena. But the Jets fought back, actually took the lead at the end of the first period. They led it 2-1. Preds come back at the second period. You get a goal from PK Subban to tie it up on the power play. And then Victor Arvidsson with a absolute laser on an odd man rush to make it 3-2 Preds. And that is where it stood going to the third period. But the Preds had to kill off a power play to start off the third period. So there's a little bit of nerves there. They were able to do that. But then moments later, a turnover leads to a goal. It's a 3-3 game. Just 29 seconds after that, 34 seconds after that, Ryan Johansson answered for the Predators. And so it was just back and forth and back and forth. And then over the final 10 minutes of the game, it was just push after push from the Jets as they tried to tie this game up. Preds leading 4-3. And so many times we've seen the Predators able to ice away games in that situation and seal games at Bridgestone Arena. But even with the crowd completely behind them, the Jets just kept coming and coming and coming. And I think that is going to be a theme in this series. And last night they were able to get one home. Mark Scheifele hit one off the post. He stuck with it on the same shift, was able to bury one from the left side of the net. That made it 4-4. Bridgestone Arena fell silent, complete stunned atmosphere in there going into that intermission before overtime. But to the Predators' credit, they've been in these situations before. They've tasted the disappointment at the end of regulation before. They were the experienced team going into overtime, and they looked like a team that came out as if nothing had happened before, or as if they were the team that scored at the end of regulation. With the way they came out in terms of energy and aggression to start overtime, they were phenomenal. They had most of the chances, controlled most of the play in the first overtime. They weren't able to get anything to go, but they carried that into the second overtime and finally got that 2-on-1 where Craig Smith fed Kevin Fiala, and he scored. And now Kevin Fiala, by the way, is becoming a bit of an overtime magician for the Predators in these games. He scored last year in Game 3 of Round 1 against the Blackhawks. in overtime to give them the win and a 3-0 series lead there, which essentially helped them put that series away. He then, of course, broke his leg in the second round last year and missed the rest of the Preds run. And I think the start of the playoffs this year, he was a little too anxious to get out there and be a part of something special this year after having just a brief taste but not really getting the full experience last year. And at times I think he's tried too hard so far. He admittedly told me the other day that he was flat out terrible in the first round series against Colorado. He knows he has to be better, and he told me, seems like everybody else in the world knows that he wasn't good and has to be better as well. He has been better in this series. He's got a couple of goals through the first 2 games. He's been an impactful guy on that second line. The line itself has been better. And last night he gets another game winner, this time in double overtime, as the Preds win 5-4 and even this series up at a game apiece. The type of goal that isn't just a game winner, but very well could change the complexion of this series and maybe the season for the Predators. Because let's face it, if the Jets somehow get a bounce in that overtime and win, and now it's a 2-0 series lead for Winnipeg as they head home, it feels totally different. It feels like the Jets are in complete control of the series at that point. And you just wonder how much is left if you can beat Winnipeg 4 out of 5 games and have to beat them twice in their building where they won more games than anybody in the NHL this year. Now it's a 1-1 series. Winnipeg still is going to feel good having stolen a game here at Bridgestone Arena, but if you're the Predators, you've won, you've played pretty well through the first 2 games. I think you can still play better, and you're not going to be intimidated going north of the border, because the last team to beat the Jets in Winnipeg, the Predators. And the Predators went up there on February 27th and won. And then late in March, on March 25th, they were up there again and took a game to a shootout. So if anybody can go into that building in Winnipeg with 15,000 plus fans, the smallest building but maybe the loudest building in the National Hockey League, if anybody can go in there and silence that crowd and deal with those fans and walk away with a win, it's the Predators, who won more games on the road this year than anybody in the National Hockey League. And so there's definitely a confidence factor with the Preds going into that building, and you feel so much better with the swing being what it was on that goal in overtime. A 1-1 series going into Game 3 tomorrow night versus an 0-2 deficit for Nashville. A couple other big notes to me from the first couple of games. I don't think Pekka Rinne has been great in goal for the Preds. He needs to step it up as they move along in these playoffs if they're going to have a chance to move along in the playoffs. But last night I thought he got better and better the more shots he faced. And ultimately, he stopped a career playoff best 46 shots last night. That's a pretty good effort from your goaltender. And I think it's a good sign that he started to see more shots. In Game 1, he got so little action that when the chances came, and they were actually high-quality chances for the Jets, I think that's a difficult position to put your goaltender in. And he wasn't able to make some saves. Now, maybe you would like him to make some of those. I know for a fact he'd love to have the 3rd goal back from Mark Scheifele. I mean, that's just a shot without traffic in front of you. You would hope a Vezina Trophy winner, which he's going to be, by the way, in June. He's going to win the Vezina Trophy as the best goaltender in the NHL throughout the course of the regular season. You would hope that guy could make that save. But the other 2 goals that he was responsible for in Game 1, I don't put on him. Last night, I thought he gave up a soft goal on the first one to Dustin Byfuglien as well. The rest of them, I'm not sure if I put that on Pekka Rinne. I think guys put him in a difficult position, and maybe you hope he comes up with one. He makes a spectacular save to get you off the hook, as he's done so many times throughout his career here in Nashville. But he hasn't done it so far in this series. The Preds have to be better in front of him, but I think Rinne also has to step up his game. But I do think, as we saw things get tighter and tighter and later in the game, the more shots he saw from the Jets, I thought the more comfortable he looked in goal. And those 46 saves, I think, can give him some confidence as he heads to Winnipeg for Games 3 and 4. And the other big thing I saw last night was, how about the top line of the Predators? Obviously, the second line gets the attention for the game winner, and rightfully so, because they've been much better in this series. But the top line continues to show up, and last night they were terrific. Ryan Johansson with 2 goals. One of them just an absolute highlight reel type of goal where he skated around Toby Engstrom and then went top shelf over the pad of Connor Hellebuck. Just a beautiful, beautiful goal to give the Preds the lead in the third period. He had 2 on the night. Victor Arvidsson had the goal I talked about, also had an assist. And oh, by the way, Philip Forsberg just had 3 assists on the night. No big deal. All 3 of those guys plus 2 individually for the night. So your top line plus 6 overall. That's going to get it done most of the time in these playoffs. And this line, which doesn't get the recognition around the league and around hockey circles quite like some of the other top lines or the top line stars in the league do. You know, they don't get the Sidney Crosby treatment. They don't get the Alexander Ovechkin treatment, or maybe even the Steven Stamkos or Brad Marchand treatment. They don't get that really. What you get with the Predators' top line, though, is you get 3 guys who are capable in burning you many ways, and 3 guys that play a 200-foot game where they will forecheck and they will defense you throughout the course of the ice, and they are lethal when they get the pucks in their hands and get possession in the offensive zone. And we saw that last night, and it was huge, and they're going to have to continue to do that for the Predators to have a great chance in this series. I want to hear from you guys tonight. 737-7767 is the number. What did you think about last night's game? And maybe better yet, now that you're 2 games into this series, how do you feel about the way these teams stack up compared to what you thought from what you saw in the regular season? You had an impression going into this series about how difficult it would be, or maybe how easy it would be going in for one side or the other. Now that you've actually seen 2 games, how do your feelings compare now versus what you felt before the series began? 737-7767 is the number. We will get into that coming up. We'll also hear from several of the players from an excited Predators locker room after the game last night, and we'll get into the NFL draft as well. The Titans, to me, interesting stuff. If you would have told me going into the weekend when they had 6 picks that they'd only walk away with 4 guys, I would have thought, wow, that's kind of a disappointment. Probably means Robinson made a big trade. Who did he end up getting? Or what did he end up giving up to get one guy in particular? But the way it ended up playing out, Robinson made 3 trades to move up to get 3 specific guys. But most importantly to me, he got a guy he really coveted in the first round, in Alabama linebacker Rashaan Evans. He moved up from 25 to 22 because other teams certainly coveted his services as well. So he gets a guy that he really wants to play inside linebacker for Dean Pease system, a guy that fits very much what they want to do defensively. Then in round 2, they identify a guy in Harold Landry who a lot of people thought was a first-round draft pick because of his production at Boston College. Maybe slipped a little bit because of the injuries he suffered during his senior year last year. All of a sudden, he's now in the 2nd round, and the Titans move up to pick him. So you get a guy that a lot of people thought was a first-round prospect in the 2nd round of the draft. You wipe yourself off the board in the 3rd and 4th rounds, but you trade up again then on day 3 to get Dane Cruikshank from Arizona, a defensive back that's got some versatility. He can play both cornerback and safety and looks to be a guy who can come in and be a part of the rotation for the Titans on the back end. So again, it's another guy that you identify who can come in and hopefully give you some help right away. And then a lot of people have talked about, do they go out and try and find another quarterback that they can start to groom to be a backup for this team? And you get a guy in Luke Falk in the 6th round that can come in and be a backup this year for Marcus Mariota and Blaine Gabbert, and the hope would be eventually he just becomes your backup to Marcus Mariota. Didn't spend much for him. Not much at all, frankly, but you hope he develops into that. So ultimately just for prospects, but I think guys that they feel really good about for serving specific roles on the team. So I also want to hear from you guys tonight after watching the draft this weekend. Are you pleased? Are you ecstatic? What grade would you give John Robinson right now for what he did in this draft? And how do you think the guys they drafted fit in for what you believe Mike Vrabel and this new Titans coaching staff want to make the Titans look like this fall? Phone lines are open. 737-7767, the number. We can talk Preds. We can talk Titans in the NFL draft. And we will get to it all as we continue on the other side here. This is Sports Line on News Channel 5+.